As you know, I'm not a big fan of hyperboles, and with the recent announcement of DALL-E 3, a lot of my fellow YouTubers have been quick to claim that Midjourney is about to be slain like a wolf slays a rabbit. And while I can appreciate a certain amount of drama on YouTube, I think it's time for a more nuanced take on this. In fact, I think most people are looking at this the wrong way because they're trying to compare two companies that are actually pursuing two entirely different objectives. You see, the key difference between Midjourney and DALL-E 3 is... Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's take this one step at a time. So before we can even try to assess whether DALL-E 3 is a real threat to Midjourney or not, we still need to actually try the real thing. Personally, I don't have early access, and neither do most people. So we can really only work off what we can read and see on the DALL-E 3 website. I do know that some YouTubers have had access to the research preview, but with all due respect, in most cases, AI art isn't even their primary focus. And there's a very good reason why creative directors exist. That being said, let me address some of the most interesting aspects of this announcement, and especially their marketing website. So right at the top of the website, you can clearly see that OpenAI has invested a lot of effort into trying to carve out what makes DALL-E 3 special. And it reads, DALL-E 3 understands significantly more nuance and detail than our previous systems, allowing you to easily translate your ideas into exceptionally accurate images. Now, this bit is actually very interesting. See, even though they are primarily comparing DALL-E 3 to its previous versions, anyone who's spent a decent amount of time working with Midjourney can tell you that this is actually a pretty big thing. Now, there's absolutely no reference in there to creativity or aesthetics. Instead, it focuses entirely on nuanced control. And if we go even further down the page, it gets even more explicit. Here it reads, modern text-to-image systems have a tendency to ignore words or descriptions, forcing users to learn prompt engineering. DALL-E 3 represents a leap forward in our ability to generate images that exactly adhere to the text you provide. So it almost feels like OpenAI decided to sit down in a meeting and try to figure out what their unique value proposition actually is. Because let's face it, so far, DALL-E has not been able to compete in terms of creative aesthetics and image quality with Midjourney. And even though the latest images that they've showcased on their website are a considerable improvement, they are still not on the same level as Midjourney's. And the mere fact that they are obviously cherry-picked images because it's a marketing website is a case in point. Now, I realize there are a lot of people out there who are going to object to that statement, but let's be clear here. Every single person that I know who actually works in a creative field agrees on this. It's primarily the laymen who are not necessarily creative professionals who tend to not see these subtleties. Anyway, so it's pretty clear that OpenAI has realized that their primary competitive advantage are their natural language processing capabilities. And I will admit that this is one of those areas where even Midjourney would admit that they have a lot of catching up to do. And that's one of the reasons why they keep emphasizing in their office hours that they are working on improving their natural language processor. Now, let me be clear about one thing. I think we can all agree that it's not always easy to write a prompt that is 100% fully coherent. Midjourney does achieve this to a certain extent, but it still has its limitations. And that still does result in quite a bit of additional work and sometimes even wasted time. Now, Midjourney usually makes up for this by producing absolutely stunning imagery, but if you're using it in a professional environment, then all of the trial and error can sometimes be quite frustrating. Hey, sorry for interrupting you right in the middle of the video, but I just wanted to share something with you. As many of you know, I have an online video course called Masters of Midjourney, which teaches you all of the foundational skills that you need in order to get the most out of Midjourney. And I know that some of you are still on the fence, trying to figure out whether this is right for you. And I get it. You look at all of the free stuff that I share right here on my YouTube channel, and you ask yourself, how much more can there really be? Well, many of the things that I do in these videos, including the method that I just used, are explained in far more detail in the course. I show many different examples, and I teach these to a degree that makes sure that you really understand how they work, and you can apply them to pretty much any project, not just one particular use case. So if you want to learn how to control Midjourney and prompt with intent, then visit mastersofmidjourney.com. I'll see you on the flip side. So that's why this particular example shown on the DALL-E 3 marketing website is so interesting. As you can see, the entire marketing strategy of DALL-E 3 now revolves around prompt coherence. Obviously, we have to assume that this is a cherry-picked example, and for all we know, This may have not even been created with a single prompt, but instead via inpainting. And the way that they've displayed these different prompts in this example leads me to believe that this may have been inpainted. And once Midjourney irons out all of those little issues that the current inpainting feature has, I'm sure it'll be able to produce very much the same thing. But hey, we don't know what we don't know, so for the time being, let's just assume that this is actually the type of coherence that we can expect from DALL-E 3. And if that's the case, then I have to admit, this is big. Because so far, even though we have had some form of natural language, it's simply not been possible to articulate a scene with such detail. We've always had to figure out which part of the prompt is most important, place it towards the front of the prompt, and then use various different techniques to force Midjourney, as well as any other text-to-image generator for that matter, to produce exactly what we want. But if DALL-E 3 really works the way that they are suggesting it does on this website, then that is a major breakthrough in terms of how much control we can have over the images we create. And I can definitely see how this might be a bit of a threat to Midjourney for certain use cases. As I already said at the beginning of the video, I'm not really a big fan of hyperboles. Most of the time, the media, as well as social media, just uses them to grab your attention. Kind of like the thumbnail of this video was meant to grab your attention as well. But let's be honest here, the real world is much more nuanced than this. Nothing is ever a insert random app name killer, especially not in the short term. In the long run, who knows? But no one ever puts a product on the market that immediately takes over the entire market share within just a matter of days. And anyone suggesting otherwise is being insincere. So here's my personal take on what I believe is going to happen. I think it's pretty obvious by now that prompt engineering is not something that the broad masses will be doing anytime soon, and even not the large majority. I mean, believe it or not, I still know a whole bunch of people who either do not know what ChatGPT is or have not tried it, and all the others barely even use its full potential.
What?
So in the pursuit of growth, companies such as Open AI and Midjourney will continue to increase the level of abstraction in the user experience. And the reason why they're doing this is because they want it to be more accessible. They want more people to be able to use it. Listen, what may seem intuitive to you is not necessarily intuitive for the vast majority of people. Now, I do think that there will be quite a few prompt engineers in the future, just like there are many software developers today as well. But many of them will be working on ways to make it easier for the average user to use this technology. I also believe that in the medium term, OpenAI as well as Midjourney will be pursuing fundamentally different market segments. The fact that OpenAI is focusing its efforts on prompt coherence rather than aesthetics tells me that they're trying to target the mass market. So basically, anyone who just occasionally needs an image, either for a personal project or for a non-creative professional environment. And the mere fact that so many people already use ChatGPT will probably make it relatively easy for them to capture that market segment, especially if the results are good enough to satisfy their immediate needs. And the fact that it would probably fall within the ChatGPT Plus bundle kind of makes it a no-brainer. And I do believe there is a fair chance that ChatGPT will eventually become the new omnipresent Google among the masses of consumers. Now, Midjourney, on the other hand, has already captured the hearts and minds of so many creative people. The realism and the aesthetics of Midjourney continue to dazzle and fascinate people from all around the world. And despite many of its shortcomings in its user interface, don't underestimate how loyal such a community can be. And as long as Midjourney maintains that top spot in terms of image quality, then the creative industry is probably going to stick with them for a long time. After all, no one's really interested in using dozens of different applications. Now, I do believe that Stable Diffusion may be in a bit of a tricky spot, and that includes all of the startups that have built on top of Stable Diffusion's technology. Stable Diffusion essentially has two value propositions. First of all, it's free, but it also gives you considerably more control over what you can do than most of the other applications out there. The problem, though, is that the technical threshold and the learning curve makes it very difficult for most people to actually harness its full power. It's a very compelling option for all of the technically literate tinkerers out there, as well as larger corporations who have the necessary resources to dedicate teams to this sort of thing. But for the vast majority of casual users, it's just not a realistic option, especially not unless it somehow gets enhanced with some form of natural language processing. I mean, just look at this prompt. Even the most complex Midjourney prompt looks more natural and simple by comparison. In my opinion, there are essentially three ways to win in this market. You either create the cheapest product, or you create the simplest product, or you create the best product. So who knows, maybe the future of the market will look like this. Cheapest is Stable Diffusion, the simplest is DALL-E 3, and the best is maybe Midjourney. I don't know, you don't know, nobody knows. But I'm sure as hell curious to find out. That's it for today. Remember to check out the video description for my Midjourney course, as well as a whole bunch of other free stuff, such as my Prompt-A-Lot Chrome extension. I'll see you next week and keep on learning. Take care and cheers.